Hello, map makers. Today we're doing another ASMR fantasy map drawing. Going back to the basics. This is number 3 that we're on. I'm rather excited. First episode we did a good island next to a mainland. Second episode we did something of a smaller region, maybe of 2-ish continents. Today we're going to try and do a whole continent, maybe the size of Europe. And I think we're going to have a good time doing it. So, I do this with pencil. Finished product, I just darken it in post-editing. I just like it a little better than ink. Make a little mistake, doesn't matter. One of these days I might do it in ink, but I think that'll be another day. So I'm just going to start off with a coastline. I notice it's always hard to see this corner here. So what I'll do is maybe leave that portion blank just a little bit. Let me just draw a nice coastline that makes geographical sense. It's going to go in and out. There's going to be bays and inlets and peninsulas. And I want this to be a rather large section, as there's going to be probably a mountain range right around here to separate it, such as the Ural Mountains separating Europe from Asia. So I wanted maybe not one whole land mass that is as big as that, but I think this will do. So we're already seeing this is a very long, or tall rather. If it, this could easily be shifted the other way, 90-degree turn, and I could make it all just the same. But I think I'll just keep it as it is. And you can kind of get a good idea of maybe the size of some things. Maybe this peninsula here is like Italy, the Italian peninsula. It's a little more stout and not quite as long, but it is a boot, isn't it? It's got that boot shape, so maybe I'm obliged to draw a little Sicily somewhere around here. It is mirrored. Well, that's alright. I am not trying to draw Europe verbatim, as it were. So I think since I'm used to seeing things where I live, being in the northern hemisphere, this is going to be pretty far north, almost like the Arctic. So going to have a lot of islands, actually. Reason for this is they're basically icebergs out there. If you think of the North Pole, a lot of it's water and a lot of it just looks like frozen islands. Which is, I guess, basically what it is, right? That's where the polar bears live. In the North Pole. Or the Arctic, rather. I don't think anyone can survive the exact North Pole. First of all, because it's mostly water. But I imagine it's a little chilly. Just a conjecture. Alright, that's a good number of islands over there. I think I'll put another one there. making an island chain. And I know what I want to do. I want to make a really big island right here. It's going to be close to the coastline. Yeah, now this is interesting. Here comes the fun part. You know, this is looking a little bit more like Europe than I intended. Mirrored. This is kind of Greece right here, isn't it? Alright. So, my next goal is to make this less like Europe. How about that for an idea? It is supposed to be an original fantasy map. Not that there's anything wrong with drawing actual maps. I actually said in one of my other videos that that's actually harder, in my opinion. One of these, if you make a little mistake, it's just part of the map. A real map, a legit map, if you may. If you make a little mistake, it's kind of ruined. Unless you have a real clever way to fix it, especially if you're using ink. And that's why I use pencil. I'll get there, don't worry. Alright. I like how this is coming along. I think I'll put another one here. And one right here. Yeah, there we go. I want one way out there. There. And right there. Ooh, I like how this is coming along already. Ooh, maybe one here. And there too. Alright, looking good, looking good. What I want to do next is mountains. So, like I said, I want a mountain range right here, so we'll just get right along with that. I decided that my shadows were not as prominent as I like them to be. They were kind of just an afterthought. So I'm actually going to try and make the mountains a little less rigid. And that way I can justify having darker shadows. So some of these ridges might not even show up after I'm done with them, but hopefully we can limit it just a little bit so that I have a better handle on that. Now mountains are going to be mostly straight, and I put emphasis on mostly. They'll curve a little bit, but this is an entire continent we're talking about here, so I'm sure that one curve is gonna be just fine. Now, because we're only considering this continent here, this is the rest of landmass, but these are maybe very separated cultures. So we are going to only draw this area. I'll label it some other continent name, but besides that, nothing. Alright, I think we need another mountain somewhere. Now, like I said, we're trying to avoid making this an exact copy of Europe, so no Alps here, or wherever it may be. No plateaus in the Balkans, or whatever you might call that area. So maybe we'll put it along here. Sometimes I like to think about, well, why is there a mountain there? Did maybe a subcontinent like India drift from the Indian Ocean and crash into the landmass and squish all that soil and rock together. Maybe right here. This little blob here is a bit of a landmass that floated into an existing continent. So what we do, we draw some mountains that look like they've been created by that very thing. Because these are vertical mountains, maybe I'll make it look like they're zigzagging just a little bit more, but for the most part they are a rather straight line. It's just going upward. I might curve it a little bit to the left here so that it looks like a, it wasn't just, boop, boop. It kind of curves around as if the middle was the strongest and pushed it away further when the subcontinent crashed in. Yeah, there we go. This will be a small one. Maybe not quite that far already, but there we go. Okay. I like that. I like that. Coffee. Alright. Now, let's plan. I like to put in mountains first, but then skip over hills, because those look more like a decoration. If you fill them out enough, it is obvious where the hills are. But whereas you can't really put a city in the peak of a mountain, you can be in a hilly area. So it's kind of guaranteed I won't have a city right there, but it could be right there and surrounded by hills. So next up, you go right to settlements. Let's use a different pencil here. I try not to sharpen on the video. Leaves too many. So I take out a bunch of pencils right off the bat. Yeah, that's a little better. Okay. So, it is a little interesting that it's a vertical Europe, in the very least, so. Let's draw a city here. I think that would make sense. Getting some Venice vibes. And I wanted to make my cities a little bigger than I usually do. But I think rather than draw the little icon bigger, this time I'm gonna get a little crazy. I'm gonna draw things around it. Make it look a little more decorative and each one a little unique. Do draw a shadow, so we have it. And I think what I'll do is maybe add a windmill here. That looks enough like a windmill, I suppose. I usually just draw that little walled-in town. But these videos wouldn't be very interesting if I made the same map over and over again, would it? I was thinking about it, though. I do enjoy Bob Ross. And I kind of noticed that I hate to admit it, but a lot of his videos are similar, we'll say. My fiance and I did a Bob Ross trial just the other night, and if I can remember, or at some point anyway, I'll put our finished products on the screen, and I'd like you guys to guess whose is whose. I think we'll play a little game. And I'll give you a hint. Both of my parents got it wrong, so it might be the opposite of what you think it is. I'll make it tricky for you. Alright, so that's one there. I also want to try... I always have shaded mountains on the right. It's easier for right-handed people. But not really for the buildings. So maybe what I'll try to do is just darken that tiny bit. I'll leave that there. Not bad. I don't hate it. So I think I'll keep it. Alright. Let's draw some more cities, shall we? We'll do one here. No, I want them all to face the same way. That's the consistency I always talk about, but you can find things that should be consistent and aren't as good when they're super consistent. You gotta find a balance between the two, which is a tricky thing to do, admittedly. Alright, for this one I think I'll maybe... What do I want to do to expand this a little? Trouble is, I didn't leave much room on this side over here. So we'll just draw it in. It's fine. I think that'll do. Big ol' shadow. Shade in a bit of the right side to make it look shaded. Now this is a new little thing I'm trying. That little bit of shading, but I am trying to shade as, maybe not as many things as possible, but definitely more things. I always preach about it and only sometimes follow my own advice. We're gonna have a lot of cities, but mostly only ones we'd consider major, so maybe not as many villages as you might expect from a smaller map. I might draw a few, just in case it might look a little more varied or interesting. Maybe you just want some inspiration for a larger map for a role-playing campaign. And for that sort of thing, you will probably visit villages at some point, so include the important ones, maybe. The ones along the way of a journey. Alright. This one looks a little sparse, so I think I'll draw a little thing there. Another maybe tower there. And that looks a little more creative. What I want to do is shade the right now, the right side. And that'll be good. I want another couple inland cities, because yes, cities will oftentimes be on bays. These aren't, it's a big map, so there aren't necessarily going to be bays that are easily seen. Sometimes a smaller mouth of, um, I have this one and this big leading out to a rather large sea, size of the Adriatic. But you could very well put it somewhere like, I guess here. It's not the small, or it is a small-ish bay. But I do want some smaller settlements, at least, on the rivers that lead out. Let's draw a keep. Tower. I don't know what that part's called, admittedly. The Barbican? No, that's the Great Gate? The Graded Gate, perhaps? Other fans of castles, if you want to fact check me on whatever you call, I guess, the base of a castle. The non-turret parts. For some reason I want a watchtower right here. It's calling to me. Yeah, that's fun. I will give it an extra flag. That's fine. It doesn't have to be exactly 3 flags. I mean, this one's I accidentally double flagged. I highly doubt you can see that on the screen. But maybe in a higher resolution, we'll be able to see it. Alright. Next up. Ooh, almost forgot to draw my shade. It's getting hot. Weather's getting warmer. We need that shade. And a little more beneath it, I think. Alright, we're gonna have a city right here. This is gonna be... Ooh, do I want to make it a copy of the Balkans? See, the thing about, I suppose, almost copying a real map is that you get a good idea of what geography really looks like, instead of making something that makes no sense, learning it makes no sense, and then trying to justify it with magic, right? Yeah. I'm sure anybody who likes to make up a story or two about maps they draw have done that, almost certainly. Alright. We're gonna shade this in now. Put a little flag on that bad boy. Give him a little shadow. And we hut here. It's more like a longhouse, isn't it? He still has a shadow, though. I want a city right here. And, I was talking about understanding geography, so you have a pretty realistic map. And I'll poke fun at using magic to justify unrealistic geological features. But you can get away with it if you really know what you're doing. I mean, hate to say it, but Middle Earth, which is a map I showed in a recent video, it's actually notorious for being geographically impossible in a couple ways. Mostly mountains. You see a lot of lone mountains. You have Mount Doom. You have, the Lone Mountain. And that doesn't happen. Just about all. Even volcanoes are in mountain ranges. So try and avoid lone mountains, but I don't want to discourage you from saying, well, a wizard used his magical staff to raise up the plateau to seal away the evil gods. I mean, and then you have a lone mountain in the middle of a savannah. And if you can make it a cool enough story, I don't see why you can get away with it, but... So, I don't actually know if it's in the lore of Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. If there is a justification for two mountains that are just kind of on their own. Or the way they kind of make a square, for some reason, around Mordor. Great story, for sure, and I do love the art style. I tried to imitate it just a bit with my own flair. But keep that in mind if you want to make some maps. If you want to use magic to justify things like that, you got to be good at the suspension of disbelief. And that's very important in fantasy, incredibly important. You can have things like dragons, and people will just accept it. But if you have, a really thin noble that is otherwise healthy or doesn't have, a particular reason, people would be like, hey, what's the deal with that? So long as you can explain your magical anomalies, people are very quick to accept it in your fantasy. Even though it's a battle between which is more realistic, a dragon, a giant lizard, or a bit of a skinny noble. I'm sure it happens, but I also bet you it was a bit more common than you might expect. People did walk a lot more, though, so in those days. Maybe they were a bit stouter, but even so, more fit, going on adventures and all that. But if I was a king, I would certainly have lots of feasts. I'll tell you that. And I think that's a decent amount of evidence enough, isn't it? Alright, you know what, I'm gonna connect these mountains, because it feels like they would kind of crush into each other, quite honestly. There we go. Alright. We'll have a city near the mountains. I think I'll put a lake there, so they have a good source of fresh water. And also a stream. I do want to build, or rather draw a basin at some point. And it's to my understanding that basins are kind of lakes that don't have inlets or outlets, or maybe one or the other. I can't think of a very good example of a basin, unfortunately, in the real world. So, my apologies, but I do enjoy drawing deltas. Deltas now are rivers that split. Usually rivers join, but have rivers like the Nile or the Rhine, where it kind of looks like lightning bolts splitting out into the different uh, parts of the main body of water that the continent's next to, the sea or what have you. And I'll kind of decide that later. I haven't figured that out quite just yet. That's the beauty of being able to make things up as you go along. Alright, so I think I'll have a city here. I think this is going to be some pretty dry, arid lands. Or at least maybe very hot. It is very hot in this city. And it might be in the desert, but ooh, what if we do a grand tower like that? Yeah. Ooh, that's interesting. That's going to be a different culture if they're separated by mountains like that, so we might as well make it convincing and show it on our map, at least in some way. Maybe that'll be a basin. I'm not sure if you can have a basin in the middle of the desert. I guess that would be an oasis, but I always imagine basins larger, perhaps. So, okay. So, I think that'll do. And as far as cities go, now I would like to make some smaller little settlements here. I'll put one on this here island. It's a little crooked. I won't lie, it gives it an okay, almost cartoonish look, but I try not to go for crude cartoon. I mean, it is a fantasy map, so there's nothing wrong with almost a bit of a animated look to it. You don't want it hyper realistic. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a hyper realistic map. I think that's pretty cool, but especially when it's so far away in scale. A lot of the time I go for representations using icons like this. And if you're going for utility, just a square or a circle is fine, truly. Or a star for capitals, but if you can help it, I do enjoy a good little cartoonish almost castle here and there. I think I'm gonna have to erase that island, for shame. Rip. We're gonna have one here. Goodbye, farewell. Auf Wiedersehen. Good night. Nice castle there. Castle right there. Now, at some point you're going to have to decide just how many castles do I have? Well, it's going to depend on your assumed time period in your that this map takes place. Say it's maybe the early Middle Ages based. People are just starting to discover lands beyond their own. Whole new worlds are waiting out there. Trade routes are being connected, and there's brand new culture being flown around. Or perhaps you have late Middle Ages where people started to discover just how effective in administrating land it was to create feudal society and really advance it into just putting castles all over the place to defend, having levied armies instead of professional. Wasn't a very moral system. Created a steam pot for lots of war, unfortunately, but it was very easy for administration for a time before electronics. And also it let people be obscenely rich. So good for them, but everyone else, unfortunately, worked like dogs in the fields. So there's a give and take and everything, I always found it interesting that at one point, you might know the Roman Empire split into East and West, two entirely independent empires. Now they did reunite and then split and then reunite and then split again. It wasn't a one-time thing that happened. One guy even reunited the empire and then moved the Roman Empire's capital from Rome to Constantinople. I mean, I get why. They were very religiously fervorous at the time when there was a new popular religion floating about. That was considered a very holy site because of Emperor Constantine the First, Christian Roman Emperor. Always thought it interesting that they did split, though, and kind of thought, yeah, this'll never make us go to war. But as it turns out, the West fell relatively quickly after those changes. But the East Roman Empire actually continued to thrive, just under a different name. The Byzantines, who very much still considered themselves Roman. That was their proud identity for quite a long time. And rather than just say, well, we're fine, they actually tried to restore the Western Roman Empire. It ultimately did not work. At their height, they did have recaptured territory in southern Italy. But it was so far removed, both politically and religiously, from the kingdoms that emerged from a broken Western Roman Empire, including the kingdom known as the Holy Roman Empire, which just collapsed because of hereditary rules pretty quickly, but did maintain as a what would become the Kingdom of Germany. Yeah, that's I'm not the authority on the politics of the Holy Roman Empire. I just think it's a funny little bit of history that the irony in it, I guess you could say. Bit of shading. Bit of shading. And hey, I mean, since weird things happen and like that in the real world, I wrote a story once where there's an empire with only 3 major cities. And so, at best, that's the main region and then 2 different kingdoms, which is a pretty small empire. But it was because 2 nations recently earned, though they had to pay war reparations, they became independent. But it was hotly contested just what that meant. So you end up with an empire that's barely an empire, but it still carries the name. Even if it always doesn't operate exactly that way. Get some shade in there. Throw some shade. I think we need some more castles over here. I do want to put more settlements on the coastlines where there are bays, because why have a perfectly good piece of land and not settle it? I think you'd have more settlements that make really good sense than settlements that don't make sense, although they do exist. That's an important thing. I actually like to make little cities in spots that make absolutely no sense, because people do that. It's freezing cold up here, so what do? We put a settled people in the tundra. Do crops grow there? Not very well. But is it maybe perhaps remote? Not necessarily. Remote and provides a defensive advantage, is what I mean. Is it next to a particularly scarce but valuable commodity? Could be. There should be some reason it's there. And that's what I was talking about with that suspension of disbelief, see? It doesn't have to make sense, but there should always be a reason. It shouldn't always be a good reason, but it should be a believable reason. Don't make your audience say, well, that's dumb. Make them say, well, that was dumb of them, meaning the people who settled there, not the artist or the author. That's the trick, though, isn't it? Do another one here. One right there. Shading beneath and to the right. I do kind of like how that looks. Makes it look a little less plain, I think. It'll show up better in the final product, I'm sure. Oop, I always miss one or two. And kind of like that, actually. I'll put one right here, and then I think that'll be it, at least for major settlements. You know what I mean? And then I don't really think I want to include villages in this map. There are some good settlements in it, major settlements. Unless maybe I want to make a very strange culture somewhere remote. Maybe where even a different species of humanoid live. Elves of sorts. I could make a whole new island if I wanted to. I did promise I wouldn't touch this part, which I want to stick to because that's where the compass will go. So I think what I'll do is... That's a good question. You know what? I lied. I am going to put a giant mountain here. You want to know why? Because I want to break the rules. Maybe I'm a hypocrite. But at least I was willing to change my mind. At least I was willing to learn from saying what I say out loud and being willing to change my opinions. I think that's a very good trait. Otherwise, you're obstinate. And some people take pride in that for sticking to their guns, but it's not always the right thing to do. I'm just going to give the indication that that's rather mountainous. There. I want a snowy peak, though. Yeah, let's do this. It's gonna have some shading, just like that. Oh, look at that. It's not light enough. There we go. The darkness was a bit on one side. Yeah, now that's a mountain. That is a mountain to be proud of. Should we make it a volcano? Nah, I think we'll just have a temple that lives up there, maybe. Or, I have another idea. Yeah, let's make a smaller mountain so at least there's a way to get up. Now that's a little more believable. That is one big mountain. Now we have to justify it, of course. So what do? We say there is a a wizard's tower right here. And who lives there? Well, it's the mightiest wizard in the kingdom of Bugala. This peninsula here. Of course, silly goose. I want a door. Oh, it's obvious it's not, city big. Just a bit of a tower there. No flag because it's not military. But, unless I somehow make an indication that there's a wizard there, I shouldn't name it. What if I put an island right here? Ooh. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to draw a portal. Bet you didn't see that one coming, did you? Now, we are getting rather creative. Make it shine. Yeah. And then the island just goes around it like that. And that wizard's there to study the portal that a literal mountain spewed from. How was that for lore? Alright. We're looking pretty good, I think. Now, I do want to name them before I draw rivers. That's a little practice I do so that you don't accidentally draw a river in the way of in front of a city name. So, we just make up names. Here we go. Ready? And I like to write these in cursive. Stara. Pushu Kanar. And even if you think, oh, maybe I use that name in a different map, it doesn't matter. Plenty of maps sound the same. Lenas Luana Pari Galarian. More on this pencil isn't as sharp as I had hoped it to be. There we go. Cool. Cost. Kortanen. Stoel. Poes. And no. We'll do poor son. Good. Is a good enough? Like a Gouda, I guess. That's a cheese, isn't it? Cortania? Nah, Cortania. Why not? Gonar. Duma. Scar. Scarn? Scarn. Macian. Poorly on. Poorly on us. Fosna. I need an H one. How about Fosna? Hos. Do. Parn. Faden. Yason. Yason. A, B, C, D, E. Egathay. Yeah, sounds good. We'll do Mount Gunnar. Mount Gunnar? What is this wizard's name? I don't know. His name's God. Why not? God lives there. God? Yeah, I know him. He lives out east. And this is... It's gotta have an X in it, so it sounds cool. Shalane. Alright, everything's named. Everything's looking pretty neato. Now this time I think I want to name... What if I named kingdoms this time? I just need to decide how many kingdoms or empires, or How many places are in a kingdom if there are any empires that have multiple kingdoms in them? Kingdoms, counties, duchies, all things to consider. So maybe we'll do... This one's a kingdom, definitely. These two cities are a kingdom. These 3 cities are in a kingdom. These 3 cities are in a kingdom. Alright. I will have to move the page around, unfortunately, so I can get a clean country name. And I don't want to make it huge this time. You kind of have to do it around the existing artwork, unfortunately. At least in my technique for doing this. Bon. What about Bona? Bonan. Add some serifs so it looks a little less like Comic Sans, even though that's basically what it is. Let's see. Which one of these kingdoms at the time would control this island? I think it would more likely be these two. But there are 3 cities, so more cities, more people, more soldiers. So I think we'll have it part of this kingdom. Although I am gonna have to... I can't just draw a giant kingdom there. I'll have to do it here and then another one here. So I think I'll make the name kind of short. First you gotta find the center of it all. I think it'll be like this. Yeah, like that. That'll do, pig, that'll do. Yeah, that's better. The trick is to be able to make, well, every time you do this, make it the same size, all the large letters. It looks weird if they're not all the same size, as you might imagine. Okay, call it Fanar. Yeah, that'll do. And then I gotta say it here as well. I think I'll do it in smaller letters though. Keep wanting to call it Fanarn. If I had more room on the mainland, I would have written it that way, I think. I suppose that's good. I like it smaller. Just looks less obnoxious, quite frankly. Okay. Then we have these two cities. Cortania is part of Fanar. So we'll draw it this way. And this kingdom shall henceforth be called Shu. Yeah, now we're talking. Alright. One there, I guess. 4 on the H, none on the S. And you have Shuente. I do think I like the look of this. It makes sense when it's a city-state kind of region, but otherwise I do like the country name. Alright. And then this last one will be... It's going to be kind of a straight line, honestly. Maybe if anything curved like that. And I don't feel like writing as much giant letters. So I'll make it a short name and just space it out real long. You see how much I'm spacing those out? Because it's such a wide kingdom. Doosley? What about Dooslin? Yeah, I like that. Give them the serifs they work so hard for. And just like that, you have country names. Next on our list, we want to do rivers. Let's start from the bottom. Here. Yeah, I don't like to do rivers colliding with country. Well, with the individual letters, I guess. That's fine. That's fine. It'll connect there. That's good. And it's gonna go through there. You can have one. But this guy's on his own. Alright, fine. I'll give him a nice little oasis. Alright? Alright. I guess that's my... Well, it's far away from the mountains. The basin is more around mountains, I would think. Um, let's do one for this guy and this guy. That's on a... Ooh. I hate when I do that. I know it's not in the frame, but I always make a mark when I undershoot my pencil, putting it down. That's fine. That's why I use graphite. That's good. Up to Gouda. One go through there, and into Porson. And then through the Wii, up there, and like that. It might be kind of hard to identify, but... And then we need... I suppose there would be water here, right? Yeah, that's good. I think this will be my delta. How about that? You gotta have one. I mean, come on. Yeah, we'll do that. Nothing wrong with a small adjustment, eh? And that's gonna be a swampy. I'm gonna add small, really small islands around it. Maybe one there too. Yeah, that's better. Just to clarify that that's a little swampy area. Okay, what else? We got... Oh, this is going to be a hilly area, so... I guess after this, I would draw hills, so... Might as well... Yeah, I'll draw hills. And I'll have it go from here to there. And I'm going to go right ahead and shade them in. And remember, hills are a lot more spaced out. They are not straight lines because they are old mountains. They used to be big and then kind of eroded and got pancaked. Some here and there and everywhere. good. Just filling up some of that white space. I'm going to make the main line a little more, well, hilly. That's a bit. I probably shouldn't have done that. Okay, that's fine. I keep forgetting I have no more coffee. Now that we have some hills, I rather like the look of them as well. I think I'll put one more here though, to really solidify that that's a different region, you know. We gotta have a couple here, and this big old barrier island. I guess that would be considered a barrier island, right? I'll have that on a lake, and it joins up right there. There we go. I like the look of that. It's gonna come down from there. Boop. And maybe this one snakes through the hills. That happens all the time. In valleys. I want to sneak them around all these letters so it's not, looking too out of place or messy. Just went ahead and filled in that lake there so it didn't look weird. Make that river a little longer so it doesn't look like a letter. And I think we're making good progress here. Now, moving on, I think our next step is going to be the coastlines. We're gonna outline our coastlines and then we gotta make the waves. So, I don't need a particularly sharp pencil for this. I'll start on this side. Try to get it as close as you can, but make it obvious you're not touching. Sun's coming out finally. It was awfully dreary this morning and I just planted green beans, carrots, and basil. And they finally sprouted and they look pretty healthy despite we don't have very clean water where I live, unfortunately. We're a very small town, so I wouldn't be surprised if we were forgotten about just a little bit. Oh, I didn't even name this castle here. Pass. Good enough. And we don't want to intersect with the name, that's why that was important. Can't get in God's way here. That would be bad. Oh. whatever. I don't like to intersect with much of that. And these shapes are going to be a little rounder than what you usually see. Or, well, rounder than the original coastline itself. It is going to have a bit of a thing like that. And you do want to do what I did, and if there's an island super close, you should just go around it rather than try and make a million little lines, you know. That's good like that. Good like that. And we just keep going along. I'm gonna go around that one because it's so close. Not putting my hand in the way so you can actually see what I'm doing. Alright. We're going to go ahead and outline the islands now. We're not going to intersect any words. Guy there and there. I don't mind it touching castles or the like sticking out into the water. But words I give a lot of space for. Maybe I should have had that one space. That's alright. I'm doing this the following morning, actually. I'll let you in on a little secret. You might hear the birds chirping outside. It's one of my favorite sounds, personally. these fellows up here. Alright, I do think that's all of the islands now. And we're gonna go right ahead and do our little lines. 5 little dashes to represent waves. Now some people will make these spaced out a little. Me personally, I like the way it looks when you just make a lot of them. You don't need to do this. But I found I like the look of my maps better when I kind of exaggerate these little dashes a little more as far as length goes. Just like doubling the coastlines. Just gives it a much more defined look than you don't expect until you really get the finished product. That's why it's important to trust the process. I found a lot in art and I try my best to do exactly what the person says so that I can truly decide whether I like that or not. That is when I'm maybe learning new techniques or watching a similar video to this. Just a bunch of little dots. Now I like to go from coastline into sea, just in the direction I'm drawing it, but it is a lot more comfortable to pull your pencil rather than push it. So, for a right-handed person, you're going to find it a lot easier to go from left to right, even though these coastlines are going from right into the waves on the left. So I might have an easier time with the eastern side of our continent here. And the reason we're doing this earlier on in the process is because this is one of those things where it doesn't matter if it's not perfect. It's quite frankly really fine. And I mean fine as in it's okay, as well as fine as in a very fine detail. In a painting, you wouldn't see a bug, even if it was there. In your model nature landscape. It's just a little too small and will blend in too much. So you just draw the grass around it, maybe the impression of grass being weighed down by a little bug on top of it, but you gotta find ways to make your art, get the impression of things, not necessarily drawing every little detail. That's something I struggled to learn as a budding, I guess you could call this sketching, right? I'm really not too much on the terminology of art. I've mentioned before that this might get some disagreement as far as talent goes, but just in how we get talented at things. But I don't consider myself a born artist, see. Not in the visual arts. I didn't really learn many techniques from high school classes. I always had that period of class devoted to band. I wanted to be a musician, and I still do enjoy music very much. And it wasn't until much later, after I decided not to teach music, that I rediscovered my love for making maps, not just looking at maps. I do have a pretty nice history book at my parents' house. In my old little library, we have too many books here where I live now, so I haven't brought it over, but it is the history of the world map by map, and let me tell you, that is a very interesting book to me, as you might imagine. I've learned quite a bit of that book, as well as having my interest in it maintained by little pictures of maps. Now, they're nothing like these, of course. In real history, you're a little more focused on the utility aspect of it, not necessarily. Hey! Sorry, my cat is trying to eat my plants again. Pause. Resume. I learned from my history map book that it was, there was a Viking called Roland who was terrorizing France, basically. And so the French king granted him land to the north. He said, "You can have your own land, so long as you recognize that I make the rules and you stop attacking my people, because they're now your neighbors." And he said, okay. Being a ruler sounds good, not just a raider. I'm sure it took him a little time to get used to not pillaging villages. I'm sure there was an adjustment period for that, but it was his grandson, our old friend Bill, who later became known as William the Conqueror. Just 2 generations later, Roland's grandson William became the King of England, and transitioned Old English to Middle English, because the French or rather English courts were then speaking French, introduced quite a lot of words into the English language, and that's how a Germanic language, if you listen to Old English, it sounds very much like German, or at least to a non-German speaker. But it makes sense anyway, because it is a Germanic language. I suppose it would sound a bit like an older form of German. Modern German, anyway. And so that's how a Frenchman became the King of England, as well as retaining his county of Normandy. Or duchy, I'm not actually quite sure. I'll have to look it up. I'm sorry, I don't know that offhand. Coffee. We're a little squished over here, so in fact I don't. It's actually a blessing in disguise, considering I only have to make 2 or 3 little lines instead of a neat 5. Coffee. Alright, with that done and over with, I do think that I'd like to shade in my mountains. So I'm going to grab a sharper pencil, and I'm just going to go to town. I've been thinking about making my mountains darker, the shading that is, because it's not showing up quite as I'd like to. Give me your feedback on it, of course, but I'll ask, at least the one, the shading on the mountains was quite more subtle than I had intended it to be. I don't want to go crazy over here. But I also want to do my due diligence. And I think that's one of the benefits, as well as making it look interesting and more realistic, to having jagged mountains. You can have a good fill-in of shadows while not making literally half of the mountain range shadow. It becomes overbearing to look at, I think. So you see there how I almost kind of forked it? That's just adding to a little variety in the shadows. I don't mind white space to give it the illusion of features within the shadows of the mountain. Now, they're not going to be as easy to see. In the shadow. But we do want to give the impression that there's something there. having second thoughts about the beautiful calls of the birds outside. It looks like a new crowd moved in, and they don't have the prettiest song. I hate to say it. On the one hand, I want to say, oh, all bird songs are beautiful, but I'm a bit more frank about my tastes and opinions, I guess. Maybe someone would find it beautiful, and that's beauty in and of itself. But that particular bird, whatever it is doesn't rank very well in my preferences of early morning sounds. My father goes crazy over grackles. They're very small blackbird, rather. Very small blackbird that, when it makes a nest, I think I'm going to add a mountain here, just to round it out a bit, bring it closer to the coastline. When they clean out their nest of their chicks' feces, they put it in a little sack that they made, and they fly away and drop it into some kind of body of water, so that predators cannot find their nest. Well, it makes sense to me, except my parents have a pool, and so we end up with poo sacks on the solar cover, and even when the blue solar cover is off, there's little sacks of poo all in the pool. And so he sets up coffee. He sets up these predator balloons, and they're meant to reflect and look like eyes and scare away the grackles. It doesn't work, but he tries. If you didn't live in the suburbs, I think you'd buy a shotgun, quite honestly. Rest in peace, the grackles. But they're fine for now. Alright, I now want to fill in the lakes I drew, if I can find them when you don't take care of them immediately. Sometimes you skip right over them. And just keep that in mind. You do the same thing as you did for the oceans, just it's inside out. Alright, there's a couple there. I really ought to have more lakes in that hilly area rather than just near the mountains. I'm not really sure what this is. I'm not sure what I was trying to do there. Is that a lake? Oh, that's an S. That is an S. My bad. It's early. I want to draw a lake somewhere here. And so I'll put it right here. You can always go back and make lakes, just so long as they're connected to rivers. Usually. That's usually the case. Not always. Right. Not bad, not bad. Next we're gonna move on to, I guess it's tree time. Oh. Before that, I forgot to give waves to Gonar. Silly me. Alright, that's better. slightly sharper pencil. I do believe I sharpened these after I finished last night. For take one, if you will, or scene one. I've been trying to get into those smooth transitions, you know. Okay. Now, tough part for me is always figuring out what kind of trees I want to draw. I definitely want pines up here, that's for sure. But there are already a lot of hills, so I have to work around those. The way I make pines is draw some straight line. We got the trunk, the top, and just a couple straight lines. Give it a shadow, and you're good to go. Make some of them touch, so it looks like a little forest. And there's not going to be as many in one place because we have to give room to these hills here. The trick to making it look at least somewhat real is to get a group of trees, put a couple of them together to look like a forest, but you don't have forest, not forest. You have guys hanging out, maybe some lone wolves, as far as trees go. We'll put one way out there. Poor little guy's a little lonely. He needs a friend. We'll put a couple more over here. Made that a little too close to the hill. That's alright. Only you will notice because I pointed it out. And it's a lengthy process. But boy, does it look fine at the end. This is going to be a big tree. Oh yeah, you see that? Well, I guess it's not that big. I expected it bigger in my head. But you know what would be fun is if we drew maybe a great tree somewhere. Ooh, a magical tree. Let's draw him where we have lots of space, right here. Wow, that's a big tree. And because it's such a big tree, it needs a name, of course. We'll call it Boar. The tree boar. It's a boreal tree. I think that's a biome. Boreal? Don't take my word for it, but I think that's a type of biome. We'll put some guys around it so that boar isn't exposed. That would be embarrassing. He's naked. Now he's all covered up, though. Emergency resolved. Kind of off the page here a little bit. Makes it a bit awkward. I had some hesitancy to use the sketchbook, and that is one of the unfortunate troubles with it, but otherwise, I do like having a ton of paper to work through, and it's very nice paper. I actually accidentally bought poster, or what is it? I can't think of it. They're really nice paper. They're real thick ones. Long ago, and that, I didn't use it for anything but drawing maps. So I ended up with a whole clipboard full of loose paper. That would have been the one I showed you in the last video. And that's all my early maps. That video did not do very well, unfortunately, but I do want to keep up, I think, with something different. It's Monday. What is it? Something different Mondays. Might not be every Monday. Or maybe it will. We'll have to see how it works out. One of my favorite minor traditions, or maybe random traditions, is Shark Shirt Tuesday. Every other Tuesday, I wear a shirt with a shark on it. And it's a thing. It is a thing. I made it a thing. I think I'm the only person who does the thing. But it's a fun little tradition. And one day I forgot. And so I insisted that, this whole time it's actually been every other Tuesday. Take my word for it. And that's the story of Shark Shirt Tuesday. I still do it. I wouldn't say faithfully, but every couple of Tuesdays I'll say, it's Shark Shirt Tuesday. Better wear one of my, yes, that's right, one of my shirts with sharks on it. Now, granted, the reason I have so many these days is because I make a big deal out of it. Not seriously, but I'll say, Shark Shirt Tuesday. If any family members or friends see that I'm wearing a shark shirt, they'll say, hey, it's Shark Shirt Tuesday, isn't it? And then, naturally, for gifts, I get all kinds of manner of shark shirts, which I love, of course. I have a good one that has shark faces, and it's a bit of a cartoony, almost little picture show of the different kinds of sharks. They are really, really adorable. Little drawings. I do like it quite a bit. I like that shirt. Trying to decide where I want to draw a different kind of tree. Now you'll notice this river delta is rather close to the northern part. We did decide that this is a rather a rather tall map. And so we might say the equator's here. Or maybe I'd say lower, because we do have pine trees here. Say maybe this city is kind of the border. Cortania. I'm gonna trigger somebody's robot at some point. Computer robot. The Microsoft one, that is. So I'll start saying Cortania in case I reference it again. So we are going to just continue drawing pine trees. Evergreens, anyway. I just call them pines or evergreens. And the reason, we'll say that this is getting this continent over here, though I haven't named this place yet, but this continent is considered a different part of the world. We might say that this place is connected to an Arctic location. That would at least make sense as to why they are different continents, even though they're a single landmass, as opposed to Eurasia. That one doesn't make a whole lot of sense, except that it's rather big, so they just decided to divide it. And you do, it is, there are some pretty big mountains over there. I'm sure you may have already been aware. So, you don't see quite as much interaction between Europeans and Asians. And so, historically and even now, since it's been part of our Western and Eastern societies, so ingrained in such a different culture even after all these years, that I'm no expert, as I've mentioned, on geography, especially geopolitical geography. But as far as whether we're just calling large land masses continents, yes, I would say Eurasia should be one continent. But at least it makes sense in this map. It is. I suppose that would be like if the most northern parts of Canada were attached to a single, say, Antarctica was in the northern hemisphere. That would be interesting. There's nothing to say that this map isn't upside down. Maybe I'll do something interesting where on the compass rose I'll put south on top. There's nothing when you really think about it, there's nothing inherently on top that is the north of the world. It's only, north is only considered up because of Western culture's asserted supremacy. You hate to think about it. And I'm not saying we do it consciously today, necessarily. If it ever was conscious, it probably was long, long ago. But even today, we just recognize north as up, even though we don't really think about what that means. I'm gonna make different trees here. Those are the kind of teardrop ones, I guess you could say. Yeah, that does look like a teardrop, doesn't it? But there's a very famous picture of Earth from outer space. If you saw it, you know it. Take my word for it. But originally, it was what we would consider upside down. And it was published in literal terms upside down, so that north would be up, even though the photograph was not taken that way by the astronaut that took it. So, if you were looking for proof to what I just said, that is how we perhaps unconsciously alter our perception of reality to kind of affirm ourselves, even if we don't realize it. It can be, it can make you pessimistic. I think a lot of people give up on trying to be equals with their fellow humans, because it's hard. I won't lie. We see a lot of people preaching love and not practicing it. It's very sad. But I'll tell you what, that doesn't mean we stop trying. Even when it gets hard, sure, you can keep going in your own life, in your own little bubble. But if you really want to make a difference in the world, you'll advocate for people. You'll fight for the little guy, whatever that means. I say, give everyone a chance. And I mean that. I'm not just saying, minorities as far as cultures or skin color goes. I mean it for every opinion you have. Because simply telling someone that they're wrong, well, they won't listen. If you don't believe me, try going to the average protest of either political side, believe me. People can be very passionate, but mob mentality is a very strong thing. Now, I want to be very clear. That doesn't mean I'm saying there's anything wrong with protesting. But everyone has a different way of protesting. If you see something wrong in the world, you should absolutely be angry. You should make your voice heard. You don't need to make your voice heard through violence, though. That's a very unfortunate way people demand their voice to be heard. And that's not going to get anyone to respect you. Now, if I was living under an oppressive government, then I'm sure you can tell by my accent what government I live under. That is a bit debatable. I think it takes a lot of privilege to say that the United States government makes everyone suffer. There's a lot wrong with it, trust me. We have people not willing to cooperate with each other in Congress. We have a lot of hypocrisy. And people should be angry about it, but when you see someone who doesn't agree with you, give them a chance. Hear them out. Even if they say some frankly pretty dumb things, it may not be dumb to them. So even though it may not sound quite right in a group of people who are awfully zealous about the same thing, you can get pretty carried away. But hear everyone out, because that's how you change people's minds. If you want to get people to see your point of view, you gotta listen more than you speak. And I'll tell you very frankly, that's hard to do. When you hear someone spouting some nonsense, all you want to do is tell them how wrong they are. And if you feel the same way, which I'm sure everyone does, even if you don't like conflict or prefer to avoid confrontation, maybe you're very content to let people see things their own way and say they are irredeemable. I'm not saying you have to be best friends with them, but I remember one time as a child I had to work on a school project in class with another boy. To say he was a bit troubled isn't quite the word I'd like to use, but he was a neo-Nazi. Now, we were children, so believe me, I had to form my own personal beliefs as I got older. I believed a lot of things I very much disagree with today. My family believes different things than I, but I wouldn't say I was ever a Nazi. A New Age Nazi. But instead of telling him he was stupid or delusional, which, I mean, I wouldn't blame anyone for doing so, I wanted to hear his perspective. Even if I didn't change my mind, well, maybe I would have learned something about the human psyche. And I said, well, why would you say that the Nazis were right? And he tried to justify it, of course. He said pretty hateful things. And I did my best, even though I was just a wee lad. I did my best to try and talk to him and say, well, why do you feel that way? And why do you not like this group of people? And he said, well, it's hardly because I don't like them. I just don't think everything that happened was a bad thing. And I said, that's a terrible thing to say, but I want to know why you think that. I asked him if he values his own life, if he doesn't value the lives of others, and he said not really, and I said that's very sad. I wish you did care about your own life. And I think that's the issue. Sometimes we're so quick to respond to hate with more disdain. And I think people would be quicker to change their minds if we really committed to the whole kill them with kindness bit. But now that I've finished drawing trees, I guess I'll cut off my philosophy lesson. I was just trying to fill in some sound while I perform the ever-endless task of drawing trees. It's not the worst part. Definitely the worst part is the coastlines. Which might not necessarily be your case, but that's fine. Either way. Everyone has their favorite part and least favorite part of, well, anything. Even things that are fun to do. But sometimes, if you want to play sports, you gotta exercise to be strong, too. You can't just play games all the time. You gotta practice. You gotta do the important and beneficial parts even when they're not as exciting. Now we gotta think, what else can we do to this map? Well, I think we might be ready for a title, maybe some explaining writing and a compass rose. Resume. Alright. I did a little movie magic to pull out my stencils real quick. Alright, I don't have a ton of room for this compass. So, I think what I'll do is maybe I'll do the measurements of the straight lines first. And that way I can get a better idea right off the bat of how much space I have to work with. I'm doing 6 centimeters. Another 6 centimeters. And I am going to erase these lines at some point. I guess I should have gotten the middle. Which is going to be 3. We're gonna get 2 centimeters. That's 8. 1, 2, 3. Going down to 5. Now that I've made entirely too many dots, I might have to draw that into the mountain to make it blend. Yeah, that's fine. There'll be a line going through there. And there we go. We have should have a perfectly aligned dot Just realized you can't see it. What a shame. Right, we have a nice little cross there. Then, what we do is we put a circle in the middle. I really don't have a good way to measure where exactly the middle is, quite honestly. At the end of the day, it should look the best you can, but I don't. Between you and me, I don't think it's the end of the world if it's not perfect. I have been getting a little quicker at doing this though. This is a learning process for the both of us. Oh, that'll be filled in anyway. Great. Would you believe that I also like to shade my compass? It shouldn't. It shouldn't surprise you. close to the end, my friends. I can taste it. And it tastes sweet. It's the sweet, sweet taste of victory. Because in a second here, we're going to finish a map. And that's a thing we did together. Even if you didn't draw along. That's a thing we did together. Truly. And we should both be proud of that. Alright. I think this mountain is going to intersect just a little bit. Alright, that's better. And I'm going to fulfill my promise. Look at that. South is up. I'm waiting for the woke comment. Trust me, it'll come. Maybe not today, but one day. I think we'll use the same stencil. Well, we might have to figure out what works, where I can put the title. Let's try a different stencil. I didn't give myself a whole lot of space, did I? And the whole binder ring doesn't help, unfortunately. Excuse me. Tricky. This is a tricky one. I think this was a bit of an oopsie. Bit of an oversight on my part. You hate to see it. Maybe I can use a different stencil. That works a little better. Even if it's the same shape, just at a different angle. Okay, it's gonna have to go... It's gonna have to go right there. Right there. Ah, you can't see it. Oh, I messed it up already. Let's try again. I'm really gonna hold that stencil tight. Oh my goodness. I'll put it in the artwork. Ah, it's even crooked. You know what we're gonna do about that? We're just gonna make it a whole piece of art. This could look kind of neat, or it'll look terrible. I haven't decided yet. I'm just not a fan that it's crooked. Here, I'll show you. I'm working on the new setup. It'll come, don't worry. Alright. What do we want to call this map? I think I'll put it in small-ish Maybe thin letters, because it's a rather small box. Sorry you guys can't see this. I just can't realistically show it on the camera without making a ton of noise, as well as not being able to draw it with it on screen. But I'll show the finished product at the end on a scan. Really, really skinny letters. Skinny letters. And we will call our map Intari. I'll decorate that a little. Alright. Unfortunate we couldn't leave that. We couldn't see that bit at the bottom left corner, but I do believe we have a finished map. You should see it now, but hopefully you enjoyed either drawing along, watching, or just listening. I hope you had as good of a time as I did, and I will see you when we draw another map. Goodbye.